The Union Budget on February 1st announced that the government will create a National Financial Information Registry. Now, this can be as revolutionary as the creation of Aadhaar itself. What's the NFIR? Think of the NFIR as a 10x version of, say, a CIBIL. A CIBIL, or any credit information company, has all the credit information of an individual borrower or a company, based on which banks can give more loans to that borrower, to that company. But CIBIL doesn't have information on, say, bonds, intercorporate deposits, cash balances of the company, and such other financial information. So the Reserve Bank in 2018 had mooted the idea of a public credit registry, which will be a state-owned entity with all the credit information of a borrower, not just loans. So these would include loans, repayment history, bonds, market borrowings, that is, ECBs, bank balances, etc. This registry is still in the draft stage despite some rounds of committees. Now, meanwhile, the government has proposed this NFIR, National Financial Information Registry, which can contain both credit and non-credit information. See, it's financial registry. That is, all financial information of any company or borrower. So RBI, banks and NBFCs and insurance companies can give data on credit, on loans. The MCA can give credit on corporate balance sheets, that kind of data. The SEBI can provide promoter and shareholding data. The GST network, GSTN, can give GST data of the company. Tax departments like CBIC and CBDT can give tax history, direct and indirect. The CERSAI, the Central Registry of Securitization and Asset Reconstruction and Security Interest, there's a body like that, that can give data on securitized assets. In short, the government and lenders can get a 360-degree perspective of a borrower. That's from a macro end. This also helps the government to make good macro policies, just as it helps a lender to make good micro policies. And finally, the data will not be given without the permission of the borrowing company or the person who's borrowing. Now, to discuss how to go about this, I have with me people who are eminent in this subject. Sudarshan Sen, former Reserve Bank Executive Director, who knew a thing or two about the Public Credit Registry, Mr. Sharad Sharma of iSPIRT, and Sriram Kalyanaraman, formerly with the NHB. Both of them were part of a high-level committee that advised the Reserve Bank on how to create the Public Credit Registry, which the RBI had mooted in 2018. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today. Mr. Sen, if I may start with you, the first question is, where does the government start? Should it start by mandating all these agencies to give up their data?
Well, before these agencies give up their data, so to speak. So, the point is there'll be the need for many legislative changes also in enabling, I think, some of these agencies, because the scope of the NFIR, mind you, it is the National Financial Information Registry, whereas earlier we were talking about a public credit registry. So clearly the ambit of information, the scope of information goes beyond just credit, but other kinds of financial information. So I think a lot of legislative changes will be needed to enable different, regulatory data sets and various other data sets already in existence to mesh with the proposed database of the National Financial Information Registry.
Okay. But Mr. Sen, do you think it would have been a better idea to go with the Public Credit Registry first and then expand it to National Financial Registry? Should we still pursue the old Reserve Bank idea?
See, first of all, I think, even the original recommendation, my colleagues on the panel will, comment on this further. They did envisage going beyond just credit information. there to enrich the data to really enable a 360-degree view, quote unquote, of the borrower. It was envisaged that a lot of ancillary data, not necessarily pure credit data, will also be obtained. And this is going to be a mega project. It'll have to be done in stages. This is not something that we can just, do it in one stroke.
Okay.
This needs a phased implementation. It could take a fairly long period to do it, and it has to be steady, sure and steady.
Okay. All right. Let me pursue the same line of thought, though. Mr. Kalyanaraman, do you think it should be first lodged in the Reserve Bank, only simply because it will be more doable, and then take it over to the government, when tax and other things will come in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lida. In fact, the earlier committee's recommendation was clearly that. Because while we just said credit bureau is in the private hands, there will be a lot of resistance if there is a private. So in spite of all the data protection and data privacy policies, it gives everybody tremendous confidence if it is in the hands of a regulator, and a regulator like RBI. So what we sort of envisaged at that point in time is RBI will take the lead and control on it. And wherever it is needed, you could get technology help from the private parties where it is needed. That is the whole thing.
Okay, got it. Mr. Sharad Sharma, this, while it looks like a legal challenge, I will come to the legal challenges in a minute. It looks like a technologically daunting challenge, because everybody will have data in their own form to make all the data talk one language. Do you think that it's going to be that simple?
So let's go back to the principles. First principle: simple systems are elegant systems that follow basic principles. So why do we need this? Because there is information asymmetry. If you have a borrower, providing some information to the lender, they may not provide everything that they should be providing. So therefore, there's a case to be made that in public good, the lender should have access to some information about the borrower, whether or not the borrower wishes to disclose it or not.
Okay.
So if the borrower wishes to disclose it, RBI and other regulators together have created a wonderful system called the account aggregator, which works on a consent basis. So they can take any financial item that they have and they can share it with the lender absolutely on consent. There is no problem. So first of all, this has to be therefore focused on information that is not available perhaps on consent because it's adversarial information. And this is also important to keep in mind because, this has to conform to the Puttaswamy judgment, a 9-0 judgment, which made privacy a fundamental right and said that there are certain exceptions and it outlined those public good exceptions. So it has to conform to that because that 9-0 judgment I'm told by lawyers, deemed to be significant, that it will be part of the fabric of the Constitution and that cannot be overturned by law. Okay. So first is that it has to be limited to only those data sets where there is a public good being served for lending purposes, right? Okay. Because if it's anything else, the consent system of RBI itself will take care of it, right? So that's number one. Number two is that we need information for monitoring purposes. RBI has created a wonderful system, and Mr. Sen can talk more about it, called CRILIC. And the idea was that it'll get CRILIC kind system will also get folded into this. And there is a case to be made that for public good purposes, better monitoring is possible. Now, the account aggregator allows for this because at the time of applying for a loan, you give an irrevocable consent for monitoring. And so therefore, if the consent is not being given, you don't give a loan, right? Or if the person is saying, I'm going to give you a revocable consent, you say your risk is higher, I'll give you a loan only at a higher interest rate. There again, for monitoring, we have to figure out what would meet the criteria of a public good, right? Yeah. The last thing, which is not mentioned here and which is perhaps the most important, as we go to cash flow lending, we need to be able to report new loans or new credit instruments in a matter of seconds. Yeah. Because if I'm a small MSME and I'm financing my cash flow and I've applied to many lenders today at 4 p.m. and by 4:30, one of them may have given me a loan.
Yeah.
And by the time the other lender wakes up at 5:30 or 6, it should be there in the credit registry to say that a loan has already been taken, right? So that double financing does not happen.
Yeah.
So real-time reporting is very important. So these are the basic needs that have to be met and the constraints that we have to meet them in. And I think we need a system like this, but it has to be a supplemental system to the account aggregator system rather than any kind of a replacement and so on and so forth. I have more to say on this, but
Yes.
I'll come back.
Yeah, because I will want to ask what will be the relation between the two. You know, there's already a CIBIL and other, credit information companies. There is already account aggregator. So how will the regulatory architecture, who reports to whom, which are the new pieces to be added, how will they talk to one another will be a question. But I think I jumped the gun. I should have asked you all first, why do we need it at all? Dr. Sen, would you want to explain? Like Mr. Sharma said, a CRILIC is already available, a database of large loans above 5 crore. So effective monitoring database is available for the Reserve Bank. Why the need for this one?
No, see, there are two databases now, which we keep talking about. One is the supervisory database, which is CRILC, which is for loans above the 5 crore threshold. Now, that has been designed with certain specific supervisory objectives in mind. It gives us a bird's eye view of, say, a systemically important borrowers borrowing from the regulated entities, right? But it does not give us information, what are the debentures that he has issued, right? Okay. What's the kind of intercorporate loans that he has taken? What's the nature of his leverage? How leveraged is he? So in order to take a credit decision, we need much more information about a borrower than just his liabilities to the regulated entities. Similarly, for the credit bureaus, again, the credit bureaus deal only with the existing liabilities to the reporting entities and the repayment history thereof, and therefore give us only a very limited picture into the borrower.
Yeah.
So for these reasons, the PCR, or now as we say the NFIR, is an absolute must to give us all the additional data. Even today, when a banker is trying to make a loan and he looks at, say, whatever credit information he gets from CIBIL, for example, or any other credit bureau, he needs to make so many other queries on different databases independently.
Yes.
Now, the PCR, this registry is going to evade that. It's all going to be in one place.
Fair point. Now that you say, it occurs to me, we don't even know what are the legal suits against that company. We have information utilities which have that. We have information utilities like the CRESI, which tells you exactly what all securitized assets that person has. And SEBI also has some idea of the shareholding pattern and whether the same borrower is coming as a different company to borrow more, and we don't know that much about it. So I agree that the NFIR seems to be exactly what the doctor ordered. But at the moment, the doctor is ordering a break. I'm going to come back with lots more questions about the NFIR to our guests back in a minute. Welcome back. We've been speaking about the proposed National Financial Information Registry, which the budget said the government intends to create. A kind of a parent of this is the Public Credit Registry, which the Reserve Bank tried to create. I have with me three people who are intimately connected with the formation of the Public Credit Registry. Mr. Sudarshan Sen, former Executive Director with the Reserve Bank, Mr. Sharad Sharma, and Mr. Sriram Kalyanaraman, who were members of the high-level task force which advised the Reserve Bank as to how this public credit registry should be created. So we want good advice on how to do it this time when it's going to be a much larger body, not just credit information registry, but all financial information registry. Now, Mr. Sharma, before we went into the break, you said that, some work has already been done. The account aggregator system is available. So how should we think of the relationship? Should we just allow the existing, credit information companies like CIBIL and account aggregators to remain and create a separate supervisory body? How will you design it?
Yeah, so there are three type of systems we need, and they have been conceived even earlier to address the issue that Mr. Sen is talking about. As he's pointing out, you need a cross-regulator view of the borrower or of the company that we are talking about. So that's very essential. Now, so the three systems that we need is, one is an account aggregator. That luckily is across all regulators, right? It's an FSDC regulation managed by RBI, but all regulators have pitched in and they want to make it happen. The second is a system where consented flows of data will not suffice, and therefore you need in public goods, for public good reasons, you need to be able to access that person's data, whether that person wants to give it to you or not, right? Either for monitoring or lending purpose. That was earlier the scope of the PCR, and as Mr. Sen points out, the PCR can be expanded to cover other regulators. So that absolutely makes sense. The third is an aggregate data set that gets generated inside the ecosystem that becomes very vital to find out how to do future predictions, either on insurance side or on lending side for underwriting models. So these are training data sets that are there. So these training data sets have to be also shared to have good data models. We in India don't have a good system for doing that because that relies on anonymization. That's an art. It doesn't scale well. It hasn't done that anywhere in the world. And later this year, India is coming up with that system as well. It's not in the budget, but it's part of the data economy of India. It's called the DEPA training cycle. Data empowerment and protection architecture training cycle. These three systems will act in concert. And if we design these systems well, these are the only three systems that we need. Now, the important part of this is that one of the journeys that we've already started that has worked out very well for us is this principle that we will do federated data. We will not create large data stores, centralized data stores, because if you create large centralized data stores, they're vulnerable to hacking. That's the concern with Aadhaar. And more recently, Aadhaar has been completely safe and secure because of the wonderful design, the teamwork that is there. But if you look at Australia, the number of hacks they are having is unbelievable. Right? So their CDR system is now limping because of the hacks that are there. So we should not go down and forget the lesson that we've already learned, that we should have federated data stores, whether the data store is a consented data, non-consented data, or training data. But they should all be federated, because the moment we start creating national central data stores, we will suffer the same problem that Australia suffered.
Over-centralization is bad, also in data. I get that point. Mr. Kalyanaraman, the problem of dispute resolution will always be there, because my data could be wrongly reported by the bank to the credit information company, and in this case, the registry. I'm telling you from personal example that I paid off a 20-year loan in 4 years, but the bank made a mistake. I won't name names. The bank made an error when I, 7-8 years later, went for another loan, which I didn't really need. I was actually trying to examine, how much, if I need. And that person told me that the CIBIL is reporting that you defaulted. And because I'm a banking reporter, I could get it immediately resolved, actually in a matter of hours. But now you think of a public registry. Somebody has misreported. Here it was at least a semi-private company, so I could get it done quickly. Will this not be a huge problem if it is a public company? Should we think of other structures?
Right. I will come to that, Lada. Before that, let me just rewind a little bit to your last question, where you had said how this data will be accessed. Even today, and Sharad will vouch for it, all the SME lending, most of them have intermediaries who access most of the data from MCA, from GSTN, from CERSAI even, and give it in an aggregate form. While it is on consent and data is probably limited. So while we take that, we have already have an example of these data being analyzed, done, and decisions being taken. Though I would put it's probably about 180 degrees and not 360 degrees.
Okay.
Number one. So when Sharad says he will do federated data and probably cover everything, it's absolutely not an impossible task as we make it out to be. It is definitely possible. And today the technology developments have clearly proved that.
Okay.
That's To ask to your question, yes, that reminds. In fact, I myself am a sufferer and a couple of friends. Because of the process where we go back, the credit bureaus have to go back to the banks. Many banks do not respond when it is individual. So, but that is why precisely the Reserve Bank brought in an ombudsman scheme, right? If it works so well with all the private sector players, then there need not be a ombudsman. Now, that is going to remind a little bit, be it a private sector or a public sector. We think a little more. Why should somebody have 15 days to correct the data?
Yeah.
If my data is wrong and there is an appeal, especially, I presume we would start with SMEs and companies first rather than into individuals. So it's very easy to go back and verify because all this data are lying somewhere or other in the system. It's not as if, so immediately go and verify and probably correct it in 3 to 4.
Okay.
That should be the thinking and not give a 15-day or a 30-day window to correct it.
Okay.
Third, just let me complete. The corporates, as I say, and the MSPs will also have a little more say in pushing you rather than an individual. Today, you have if you are an ordinary citizen, to push it through a credit bureau and a bank is a little tougher because you have other things to do. You can only write mails or write letters. Things will be a little different. So I don't think it's going to make a difference whether it is a private sector or whether it is going to be under RBI.
Yeah.
But having said it, we all should be, when we do the design, should be completely aware of this and be super proactive to get this.
Okay. Well, now I am being warned that I'm running out of time. So, Mr. Sen, the last question. How much time do you think this will take? Do you look at this as a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, or much earlier?
I think of this as an evolution. I would not chase very unrealistic deadlines. Because credibility is going to be very, very important for this database. We have to work with what we have. Rather than create formats and then ask other database-related databases to kind of conform to these formats, let's start with what we have. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. Make that the first stage, and then we build on it over time. This could take 5 years. And let me remind you, the actual operationalization and implementation can take even longer. Like take CERSAI. It took a long time for the KYC updation framework to really stabilize. They had their teething problems. So we have the design issues, which will take time to build layer by layer, after which we'll have the infrastructure issues, after which we will have the implementation issues. So let's not be in a hurry, but let's hasten slowly. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. Thank you very much. That looks like a very good plan to be evolutionary and take some steps at a time. And looks like several steps have already been taken. I still worry that what I thought the public credit registry will be round the corner, that didn't happen as quickly. I do hope the NFIR is luckier. Mr. Sharma, Sriram Kalyanaraman and Mr. Sen, thank you very much for enlightening us about something which perhaps will be a part of the public financial framework very soon.